The story of Joshua Elishev could be your story. It could be your son's story. A story of a smart kid, perhaps too smart for his own good. After a near perfect SAT score, Joshua was educated in prison, not the Naval Academy. The author of the gripping new book, Privilege Lost, gives an oral account of his life before, during, and after his 5 years in prison in this 12-part podcast series, Losing Privilege. Losing privilege. There's a lot of different connotations to that. And there's a lot of different ways that people will talk about their privilege. They'll talk about the way that they lost it. But right now, Joshua, when we left off, things were getting serious with Maddie.
Things were hopefully getting serious with Maddie when we last left off. I had made sure that I encountered her as often as possible by accident or coincidence, by making sure that the people that interacted with her had a reason to invite me to the events she would also be at. I knew that she was having some relationship troubles, and I wanted to be the hero that was there to pick up the pieces. I was still young enough to not see anything wrong with being the rebound. So in the middle of the night, about 2 or 3 weeks after we had first met, she called me. It was 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning. Her ex-boyfriend that she had just broken things off with but was still living with had gotten drunk and high and not taken no for an answer. He had tried to force himself on her, and she had managed to leave the situation before it crossed the line. She called me, though. She had nowhere else to go. Her family was all in Chicago. So she called me, and I talked to her. Of course, I dropped what I was doing. I came, I picked her up, and I had a tiny little 1-bedroom place in what was essentially a boarding house for rejects who didn't have anyone else, and we were all each other's kind of support network. So I picked her up. I told her, look, you can stay with me till we get you a place. You know, you'll find one in a couple of weeks. Don't worry about paying me anything. I'll sleep on the couch if you want me to sleep on the couch. You can have the bed. You can have privacy. But you can come stay with me, and I'll help you come back here to get some of your things, you know, tomorrow once he's sobered up or he's at work.
But also, you're dumb. Excuse me. Let me make sure I get this right. But you're young. And you're dumb, even though you're not dumb, and you're full of.
Yes.
So I think we kind of know where this is going.
So we do. So clearly the things didn't work out with the stripper, right?
Oh yeah, I figured, because we got out of episode 2 without bringing up Julie's name again. So I pretty much figured Julie was in the rear view mirror. You also weren't, you know, with the Marines or in North Carolina anymore.
Yeah,
so.
which that's a story for another time, because she actually showed up on base, made a scene. They made me empty my bank accounts to make her go away, and that was essentially the last I saw of her. So things didn't work out with the stripper, but Maddie was the polar opposite. She was finishing up college. She was bright. She was soft-spoken. She was very conservative. Even though she worked at Daiquiri Deck on Siesta Key, where they had to wear short shorts and a tank top, she found a way to wear short shorts that weren't quite so short. And she was very conservative. When she wasn't in public, when she was in public but wasn't working, the t-shirts were up here. They weren't low-cut t-shirts. And she was very demure. She was very, very soft-spoken. You would believe her to be the definition of innocence. You'd believe her to be the definition of innocence if you were to have met her. And so I figured, you know what? I tried this side of the spectrum. Let's go all the way over here to the totally opposite type of a person. My end goal was ultimately the same at that moment. At that moment, I was really just just looking to get in her pants. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how we look at it, I very quickly developed feelings for her. She won me over. It went from, she's just got something that I want, to this is somebody I can really spend time with long term. So she stayed with me for a couple of weeks, and within 2 weeks, I was madly head over heels in love with this woman. Right? I mean, take your elementary school infatuation, your middle school and high school infatuation, and throw it in with a little bit of maturity of, this is somebody that could be a good mom. This is somebody that, can be a partner. You put the two of them together and you have some really, really powerful emotions. This would be my first time really being in love, where it was more than just infatuation. It was very predominantly infatuation, but there was more there. So at the end of 2 weeks, she had found an apartment. She was considering whether or not to sign it. It was a lot of money for one person. And I just kind of said, you know what? We've been living together for a few weeks. We're dating. It's been a great 2 weeks. Why don't you just stay? Save your money. I like having you here. And she did. She did. She stayed. And what ended up happening is over the next 2 months, maybe two months, our relationship grew, but I started noticing things that started making me feel paranoid. She would get text messages of a romantic nature from a girl that she works with who was not interested in women. And later on, I realized that she had just changed Adam's name to the girl's name in the phone. But there was just something off about it. And then, she would go to work and I would call because Leonard was willing to buy me lunch again if I got him out of his house. And so I would call and I would say, hey, I'd like to reserve a table with Maddie. Does she have a table available? And I would be told, no, Maddie's not even on the schedule to work today. She's not here. Well, she left the house 2 hours ago. I mean, according to her, she's been at work for over an hour and a half. No, she's not on the schedule. I'm looking at it right now. She's not here today. Why did she leave in her work uniform 2 hours ago if she wasn't going to work? Not even on the schedule. Like that was the kind of stuff that started happening. And it was on my birthday. On my birthday, it was a great day. One of the best birthdays, maybe the best birthday I'd ever had, from start to finish. And when I happened to look at her phone a couple of days later, because she had been texting, this girl had been texting her all day. This is when I found out it wasn't her. She just happened to leave her phone on and unlocked, and I picked it up. I looked at it. My curiosity got the better of me. I absolutely snooped. I totally shouldn't have. I invaded her privacy. But as I read through the messages, this girl was saying things like, I can't believe that you're sitting right next to Josh on his birthday and you're talking to me. Clearly, your heart's with me. Has he figured out about the white stain on your back seat that wasn't there 2 weeks ago? Like things of that nature were in these text messages. And my stomach just kind of sunk and I figured it out. I confronted her about it. And she swore up and down that nothing was going on, that she wasn't cheating. But I knew she was, right? And for too many things had been going on. Now, from where I was young, she was beautiful, and I felt she was so far out of my league that I would never get the attention of a girl this high up the food chain ever.
What's really interesting about that statement to me is you had mentioned in a previous episode that your confidence had never been higher. And now you're making this statement that, and behaving in such a way that it indicates you had no confidence at all.
So that's an astute assessment. I had a tremendous outward confidence. The Marine Corps had taught us that if you say and do everything with absolute confidence, nobody will ever know anything else. So even if you don't have a clue which direction you're supposed to go, if you say go left, that is absolutely the way that we're supposed to go, everybody who's following you is going to follow you to the left. No questions asked. Even if you're supposed to go right, if you say it and present with absolute confidence, nobody will ever question you. And so I had more outward confidence than I had ever had. Inside, I was still just a good boy with his nose in a book who had never really had the attention of the popular kids and the girls. So for me, I finally had the smart, funny, gorgeous, wholesome girl that was so much better than me. She was going places with her life. What was I doing? I was teaching martial arts. Yeah, I mean, I was real proud of what I was doing, but I wasn't going to college. I didn't have a degree. I wasn't going to be a physical therapist or a doctor. And so she was so far out of my league in like every way. She came from a family that had money. So I was not willing to break things off and let her go. Universe knows I should have, but I didn't.
Again, so you accepted all the behavior.
No.
Let me guess. No.
I did not accept the behavior. Okay. I did not accept the behavior. However, I was determined to find a solution to the problem that did not involve her and I going our separate ways. And what that solution looked like was she was preparing to graduate from the local community college and go to the University of South Florida's main campus in Tampa, a little over an hour away. Adam didn't have a vehicle. He had too many DUIs. He had no driver's license. So for me, the perfect solution here was, let's move to Tampa. It's an hour. He can't get there. And you don't have a whole lot of money. I'm paying for everything. So you don't really have the money to be driving an hour each way to have an affair as a full-time student while working. So it was a win-win. You're too far away to have regular interactions with him. He can't get to you. We get a fresh start. We put him in the past and we build our life together. Or so I thought.
Sometimes life doesn't work out the way you plan.
So we moved to Tampa. The moment that she finished, I had everything packed up. We moved to Tampa. I pushed it. We were going to be moving to Tampa anyway, but it was going to be months later. She finishes school. You've got a few months between the end of the spring and the beginning of the fall semester that we were going to go. And I just accelerated it by a few months. We upped and we moved. Except it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough.
There wasn't enough for you, for her, for your relationship. Okay.
So it wasn't enough. When I moved to Tampa, I opened up a martial arts school in Tampa. First, I started teaching on USF campus, free facilities. It was a smart business decision. And that kept my mind kind of busy. But it wasn't enough because there was that seed of jealousy had already been planted. The trust had already been broken. So now every shadow, every corner, every word, I questioned it. I questioned the truth. Whether she meant it, whether there was something else going on. So I got progressively more paranoid because I saw what I wanted to see, or I saw what I was afraid of seeing. And she was still talking to Adam, and he would get drunk and then he would start texting me and emailing me about how, she's going to have her fun with me, but ultimately things aren't going to work out and she's going to end up back with him. And it was getting out of control. I convinced her, her mom was paying out of state tuition for her to attend school in Florida. And So I leveraged that to with the idea that, well, if we're married, he might give up a little bit. And so I asked her to marry me. She would get Florida residency, save a fortune on school. And in my head, I could send him a copy of the marriage license, be like, leave us the F alone. Like, stay out of our lives.
For context, you get married after how many months together?
3.
Please continue.
Yeah. So this infatuation and this jealousy just led to a bad decision after a bad decision. And every time I made a bad decision, I tried to make the best decision for the next one, but it was consistently the wrong decision because I was following my pants instead of my brain. I was following my heart instead of my brain. So
that, and I got to believe that knowing your background on how logical you are and how much of a rule follower you are, the paradox of what was going on between your heart and your brain must have really thrown things out of whack.
It really did. So you asked me a question about how, in a previous episode, about how I see the world very black and white, and where does the gray exist? Because most of the world is gray. Well, this was the first time I ever lived in the gray area. And it was the singular most chaotic time in my entire life up until that point. Black and white made sense. Yes or no, right or wrong, laws, criminals. You know, it was very clear. Following my heart and emotion was the polar opposite of logical, rational, right or wrong, black and white, living and thinking. And I had never been there before. I had never done it before, which would probably explain why I kept making the wrong decision every single time. Because moving to Tampa would only separated us from him, not from all the other guys she could potentially do it with.
Or the issues between you.
Yeah.
Because they just followed you. So the gray area must have gotten even more complex for you because the internal struggle between heart and mind and then throwing the problems on top must have been like throwing a match on a gasoline fire.
Well, it was. And the more problems arose, the more I saw problems where there may not have been any, but by seeing them, they became real. And then I had to do it. So the person who steals a candy bar from the store gets away with it, but starts losing sleep. And every car they see is a cop undercover following them. And it just gets worse and worse until eventually they end up in a car chase where they actually get in trouble for the car chase, but there was no cop following them, right? So that escalation of my mind making it real, it happened. And so she went grocery shopping one afternoon and phone was on silent, left it in the car, something, but she was grocery shopping for like 4 hours. My mind had her back in Venice with Adam the entire time. I was losing my mind. And when she showed up with all of these groceries, a logical person who was not emotional would have been like, okay, she was at the grocery store, her phone was off or was in her purse, she didn't hear it. The groceries are clear evidence that she didn't drive an hour down, an hour back, because there was way more than 2 hours worth of shopping here. That's not where my head went. It was absolutely, you're with Adam again. Like you bought some groceries to cover it up, but you were gone just long enough that my mind made it plausible. At that point, I decided, as an immature guy in my early 20s, that I was going to get revenge. I was going to get justice for myself. And I started cheating on her, only with married women. I had
This was your logical way of equaling the score.
Of creating balance, yes. This was my logical way. Somewhere in the back of my head, I convinced myself that if she was cheating and it was tearing me apart, the way for me to not be torn apart by it, where we can have a relationship that was fairly equal, was if I was doing the same thing. If she was cheating, I was going to cheat. And therefore we have balance. And I shouldn't be jealous and hurt and upset if she's doing it, because I'm doing it too. And a hypocrite, that's not me. So that also didn't work out that way at all. Totally flawed reasoning, because that actually perpetuated the seeing shadows everywhere, if you will, because
I was going to say, now at this point, you always have the candy bar in your pocket.
Yes, I always have the candy bar, because now I'm a person that I'm a person that was always against the telling a lie to cover a lie, and the way that you just have to tell more and more in order to keep from getting caught. Except that's what started having to happen, because, well, where were you today? Oh yeah, I was at the beach. Well, how come there's no sand anywhere in the car? You don't have a wet bathing suit. Oh yeah, well, I mean, I was at the beach, but I walked on the pier. I didn't get my feet. I didn't go in the water. Like, it just had to. It was always something. And the more that I cheated on her with married women, the more I saw a text message, a glance, a look, not being able to reach her for a half an hour as she was doing the same thing. And it was really tearing us apart. Now, I opened a school. I was teaching. And to take this to the next level, for the first time in my life, I engaged in unprofessional activity in a professional capacity, because every single female student that I had became an opportunity, 100%. And from the time that we moved to Tampa until a few years later, when our relationship fully ended and my book begins, I think I slept with every female student that had ever come through my doors, even if they only came through for one lesson, one time. And along the way, they're kind of early on, there was this older woman, and I say older because I was in my 20s, but she was probably in her 40s, early 40s maybe. I believe she had mentioned that she might have been a doctor or something. I don't really remember a whole lot about her. There was nothing that really stood out to me about her. And I'll be honest, this is going to be a little bit crass, but the only thing I really remember about her is the view from behind. That's it. I don't remember her face. I remember her ass. It's kind of crass, but what ended up happening, I slept with her one time. She never came back for another lesson. She had stayed late after class to ask me a question, and I took it as an opportunity to woo her over right there on the mats. And as it turns out, her husband was a federal investigator for the Department of Veterans Affairs loss prevention team. And he served in the U.S. Army Reserve. So she felt bad about what she did. At some point, she went to her husband and confessed. I mean, never even crossed my mind that this would have happened. I don't know how many marriages I destroyed, if any. I don't know if the wives ever confessed other than her, but at some point she did. Because within a few months, there was a blue van that parked in my parking space at my apartment complex. And of course, hey, get out of my spot. I paid for that spot. Who are you? They crack the window down a little bit, bulletproof vest that says police on it. It said sheriff on it. I'm sorry, it said sheriff on it. And it says sheriff on it, and he says, oh, yeah, I'm with a special investigative division of Pasco County SWAT. We investigate human trafficking, and the Hispanic church that's right there on the corner, we're investigating them. your parking spot is the only parking spot that has a perfect line of sight to the church where I'm in an inconspicuous location to surveil them. Do you mind if I stay here? Now, immediately I went from, get out of my spot, I pay for it, to human trafficking. That's horrible. We have to save those children, and you can park in my spot 2 feet from my front door whenever you want. Just crack your window and wave at me whenever I see you here. This way I know it's you and it's not somebody else. Dark blue minivan, tinted windows. And I had a storage space directly across from my front door. It was a garage that I had turned into a dojo at that point. I was teaching there. So I immediately supported this guy. Didn't know who he was. I bought his story hook, line, and sinker. And he was there a few times.
That's because that's who you are. That up until that point in your life, you're pro-military, you're pro-police, you're the good guy, you're the knight in shining armor, you're all of those things that you describe. And here's this guy who presents himself as someone who is trying to right the wrongs of society. And once again, that military school, military training, once a Marine, always a Marine, that just kicks in and you're like, I've got your back.
So that's absolutely true. And up until that point in my life, I mean, I had grown up watching Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, CSI. That was my dad and I watched that a lot together. It was engaging. We had analytical minds. We liked to puzzle it out, see if we could figure it out before the show gave us the answer. But those are all shows that displayed law enforcement going after the bad guy, being upright. Even if they bend the rules a little bit, they generally were only interested in somebody who had given them a legitimate reason to be interested by doing something wrong. So in my head, police only arrest criminals who have done something wrong. They make mistakes once in a while, but generally, if the police are investigating somebody, it's because that person there is a bad person. So I fully supported this. Wholeheartedly. Whatever you need. You want me to here's my number. Shoot me a text message if you want me to bring you out a drink or a sandwich or something. If you're going to be here, like, I got you. I'll take care of it. I'll bring it out to you. And so then when I was teaching, he wasn't always there. It was kind of weird. Sometimes he was there 3 or 4 days in a row. Sometimes he was there on a Tuesday and a Thursday. Sometimes it was a Monday and a Friday. It was really no rhyme or reason to it. My teaching schedule was consistent, and sometimes he was there when I was teaching, and sometimes he wasn't. So I figured it had to do with the church's schedule, not mine. But whenever he was there, while I was teaching, I made sure that we put on an extra good show for him. I'm like, man, this guy's got to be bored. I'm sure he's got a camera set up, pointed over there. It's recording everything. Like, he's got to be bored. He's here for like 5 hours at a time doing nothing. So let's put on a show. At least he can break up the monotony a little bit. And after a few months, one day I came home and he was there, and he rolled down his window and he said, "Hey, I'm actually the officer in charge of all of the training for the 317th Military Intelligence Battalion and the 377th Military Police Battalion is run by a friend of mine." I might have those mixed up, but there was 2 units. One was in Tampa, that was military police, and one was in Orlando, that was military intelligence. They were Army Reserve units. And he said, I'm actually I'm an officer in the reserves. And I would love for you to come and put on a seminar, teach our guys, our soldiers, what you're doing. Maybe you can save some lives. Maybe one of them, uses it and they come home in one piece. And, if you come and you put it on, and the rest of the powers that be that are there with me watching, like what you have to do, our next fiscal budget is coming up. Maybe we get you on the books to get paid as a civilian contractor as part of our training budget. For me, that's like, this is what I've been trying to do for years. I started with Buck. We volunteered our time at the 53rd Headquarters and Support Battalion once a month for over a year.
This is one of those ding, ding, ding situations.
Like light bulb, like bells and whistles, flashing lights. This is your moment. This is your opportunity, Josh. Except looking back, those were all the warning, danger. They were not the opportunity, right? So it was flashing lights. These are just the ones you go the
wrong kind.
Yeah. So I embraced it wholeheartedly. He coordinated it. I got his email, phone number. We went back and forth. Buck actually handled it. So my partner, Buck, I had a school in Tampa. He had a school in Venice. We still did all of the military and law enforcement training together. We had gotten in with a bunch of different agencies on a volunteer basis, hoping to get on their budget. I let him handle that administrative and professional side. I was the salesman and I taught, but he did the admin stuff. So he handled it. He emailed them back and forth. That they got us in there. We went and we put on a seminar, and the seminar was such an awesome, smashing success that he did in fact set us up to go to the other one. So the first one that we did was his military intelligence battalion, I believe. And then we did so great, he set us up to go do the military police battalion. And in between, I was in a car accident. I got rear-ended. A guy was not paying attention while he was driving. He rear-ended me doing like 80 miles an hour. I ended up in the hospital for a week, paralyzed from the waist down. It aggravated my existing back injury from the military. And it culminated with, I had to be cathetered. It culminated with them doing an invasive procedure. They laid me down on a table. They had to use an x-ray to watch where they were putting the needles and stuff to make sure they didn't hit nerves, and they went into the spaces. But I had to have surgery on my lower back. Now, doctors don't do surgery for shits and giggles, especially on spine, right? There has to be a legitimate reason. You can't fake something that to get a doctor to operate on your spine. So I was really messed up. I got released from the hospital less than 12 hours before I was supposed to go do the seminar for the military police unit that he had set up. So I showed up because I wasn't missing that opportunity. I'm walking with a cane. Madeline, Maddie came with me, and she took pictures, and she came to almost everyone. She took pictures. She was supportive. She participated. I felt really supported in that venture with her. So she was there, and this is important because later on, when we define how this went wrong, the fact that she was present was how he managed to really dismantle my life. So they were recording stuff, but I was walking with a cane. I told everybody I just got out of the hospital. I had an accident. I had surgery yesterday afternoon. We're 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. I had surgery yesterday afternoon on Friday afternoon.
Who does that?
The guy that wasn't willing to miss an opportunity that would have benefited my partner, maybe saved lives, because I wasn't going to be with the cane forever, right? I was going to recover, and I brought our students, our regulars, with us, so I could tell them what I wanted to be taught or demonstrated.
And that way, you put on a good show.
I walk around. I can speak. Having a back injury didn't stop me from talking, so I could talk. I could narrate. I could teach. I could speak. I could sell. I could walk around and make corrections, and we put on a seminar. It wasn't good enough for him. And I didn't know why. I didn't know why it wasn't good enough for him. But because it wasn't good enough.
When you say not good enough, it was for the sheriff.
For the sheriff, who was a captain, I think he was a captain or a first lieutenant, or it was maybe a major. I don't remember what rank he was, but he was high enough up that he had been in a few years. It was not an entry-level officer. So I think he was a first lieutenant or a major. But he was a major. It was Major Douglas Williams. So he said, "Look, I know you just had surgery. You weren't at your best. I told them about it. They weren't really impressed, but they agreed that the fact that you showed up this soon after surgery warrants giving you another chance next month. So I came back next month and we put on a spectacular demonstration and show. I was still post-surgery, so I was careful. I mean, nobody was throwing me. I wasn't jumping around and stuff, but I wasn't walking with the cane. I was able to be more hands-on. And he kept following me. You know, we did this. We started going. We ended up with more units. Like 9 months later, the sergeant in charge of one of the units that we were training, he pulled me and my partner aside, and he said, "Hey, man, I just want you to know that there's an investigative agent named Williams that works for VA fraud, who's been poking his head around, asking a lot of questions about you guys." And I said, "Oh, no, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not doing anything wrong. Like, I'm sure that you've got me mixed up with somebody else." I never connected Doug and an agent named William. I never connected. I never made the connection. But he warned us. He said, normally the subject of an investigation doesn't know they're being investigated until they're being indicted when the investigation is complete. Be careful, because we like you. You're teaching our guys how to stay alive, and we don't want you to get in trouble for anything. I have a plaque on my wall, a certificate of recognition from that unit for all of my contributions to their training and having them score #1 in the nation on some of their training stuff. But I didn't think anything of it. I was a little shook, and then, you know what? You got me mixed up with somebody else. Fast forwarding a little bit, Madeline and I the problems never got better. The trust never came back. I was still sleeping around on her to get back at her. So I saw my own actions in everything she did. Maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was. I have no way of knowing. But I know that the day that she graduated with her bachelor's degree, her mother showed up, drove down from Chicago. Now, why does somebody at the presidential level of McDonald's International drive from Chicago to Tampa? That kind of money, you fly.
You fly.
She drove all the way down with her SUV. And as I was, Maddie asked me not to come to graduation. And I didn't. She's like, "It's not a big deal. You know, it's not going to be a big deal till I graduate with my doctorate in physical therapy. Like, this is just from my mom and I." So I didn't go. They come back from graduation and they load all of her stuff up into the Jeep and they go back to Chicago. Like, "We're done. I'm done with you, Josh. I'm leaving."
And you didn't see that coming?
Not at all. Didn't see it coming at all, because we had been planning where we were going to move next. I was going to uproot my life and move to St. Louis or Washington, Seattle, like to the different places that she had applied for grad school. I was prepared to just uproot everything to wherever was going to make her be happy and successful. I had helped her study for the GREs to get into those schools. Like we had been planning our lives. I had started packing all of our stuff up. Our stuff was fully packed because as soon as she graduated, we were moving. And we had settled on a place we were going to be moving to. I had signed a lease and everything ready to go. She didn't sign it. She didn't sign it with me. And that was okay. I was trusting, like, it's fine. We don't need to pay extra to have 2 people listed on the lease, right? Because this particular place charged by the number of occupants. They had upcharges if more people were going to live there. And so I was committed to this place because it's where we were going to go. She up and left and moved to Chicago. Turns out she had lied the whole time. We were never moving there together. She got into a different school, never told me, and was going to go to that school. So they up and left. Now we're married. And so we're talking every day. I'm heartbroken. I had been playing guitar for, 6 or 8 months at this point. I had started learning to play guitar for her. And the song that comes out next week, the album and music that is on my website, the very, very first one, What I Know, is the music that I played when I was heartbroken truly heartbroken for the first time in my life. I didn't know how to play. I didn't know what I was playing. I played something that just expressed my emotion. And here we are 15, 16 years later. And that has become the main song and name of the album. So that's what I did. And eventually, a few weeks later, she started talking to me again. We gave each other a little bit of space. She started talking to me. We had talked about starting fresh, getting a divorce to do it right, and then get married and have a real wedding. And gray area, no logic. If we're gonna do it right and get married in the future, well, we had a courthouse wedding anyway. We don't need to get divorced to get married. We just pretend like we're not married, and when we have a wedding, we have a wedding. You don't need to do an additional marriage certificate. But I was not logical. I was really depressed. I was depressed to the point of being suicidal. It was really bad. And I agreed. Okay, we can have an amicable divorce. We can get divorced. We're best friends. We'll work on this. So I went to Chicago. I stayed with her for the Thanksgiving weekend, and she came down to Florida, and she stayed with me for another weekend. When she came down, we went to the courthouse. We filed for the divorce. She came down a couple of months later to go finalize the divorce. It was all pleasant. It was friendly. We made love during those times that we were together. We walked hand in hand. I really felt like, you know what? This fresh start is exactly what we need. Trust is coming back. We are starting to forgive for the wrongs, like clean slate. There's really a chance here. As it turns out, when your marital or dependent status changes, so does the amount of money that the VA pays you. And if it changes in a way that benefits the VA and you fail to notify the government within a certain number of days of your change in dependent status, you're committing fraud because you're getting paid money.
You were on Williams's radar.
Williams had been following me around for nearly 2 years, trying to catch me doing something wrong. I didn't speed. I didn't jaywalk. I had been so fully sober, not even a glass of wine. I didn't smoke weed until I was in my 30s. So there was no weed. There was no nothing. I was boring in bed at 9 o'clock every night, like Netflix, books. I didn't do anything. I mean, my worst vice might have been I watched porn from time to time in the privacy of my own home. And it was actually pretty vanilla even there. So what am I doing? You can't get me on jaywalking. You can't get me with a parking ticket. So he had nothing. He couldn't get anything. And I handed it to him on a silver platter because the nearest VA facility was an hour's drive away. I was tight on money again, and I was heartbroken. The last thing I wanted to do was go tell them to take my money away. I wanted to die. I attempted suicide. That wasn't on my radar. The day I hit the statutory limit on how long you have to tell them, he got his warrant, he got his grand jury indictment, and he picked me up. Except he didn't pick me up for the commission of a crime. He picked me up for conspiracy to commit a crime. And this is where the fact that Madeline came with me to everything related to martial arts and all my VA appointments came into play. Because in order to have a conspiracy, there have to be two people who conspired. You don't actually have to commit a crime. This is how they got Al Capone. This is where conspiracy originated from. They knew he was committing murders. They couldn't prove it. They finally had to get him on tax evasion. But if he hadn't evaded his taxes, they would never have been able to charge him with anything. He would have got off scot-free. So RICO, for racketeering and organized crime, came out with conspiracy. Anything you can think of, they have an equivalent charge with conspiracy in front of it. They don't have to prove you did anything. It's why the feds have a 99.7% conviction rate, is because you could be totally innocent. But if you talk to somebody, they've got a conspiracy and they don't have to prove anything. And he used that I think I might have been overpaid by $52 from the Department of Veterans Affairs, given the amount of time from the divorce being finalized to when he picked me up. And he charged me with conspiracy to commit fraud against the United States government and Department of Veterans Affairs by failure to report a change.
Let's pause right there. I'm going to ask one question for clarification,
Okay.
and then I'll move to the second part. Was Williams the husband of the woman you had the affair with?
Yes.
With that, we're going to stop here with one more question. When you were convicted and you were sentenced, how many years in prison did you get for conspiracy to commit fraud?
I didn't get years. I got months.
We're going to stop there. We're going to stop there.
Okay.
The episode, the beginning of the end. And right now, we're at the end of the before. And we're going to pick up in the next episode when Josh actually does go to prison.
Losing Privilege is a 12-part podcast series telling the fascinating story of Joshua Elishev and his roller coaster life of success and deception, love and loss, and the determination to survive prison and build a life after nearly losing his own. Visit JoshuaElishev.com. That's Joshua, ELYASHIV.com for details on his book, Privilege Lost, his music, and upcoming projects. And listen and watch all 12 episodes of his podcast, Losing Privilege.